Hey guys, I just finished doing a quick podcast. I only had half an hour because the Treasurer had to go to a National Cabinet meeting. The Federal Treasurer, I'm talking to him about what's going through his mind, about how does the economy look going forward. Are we going to have a terrible landing, or are we going to have a really big bounce? So it's time for No Bullshit with the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, welcome to an episode of Straight Talk, mate. Thanks very much for coming on at this busy time of yours.
Great to be with you, Mark, and all your viewers.
So I want to cut through all the crap. So we have got Doherty Institute stuff being adopted by, recommendations, I should say, being adopted by National Cabinet, which is state governments and premiers and of course, our Prime Minister in a National Cabinet environment. We are looking towards, let's call it freedom, or just reopening day, or a series of reopening days, or with restrictions, etc., by state. How important is it for us, and you're the Treasurer, how important is it for this country to reopen as soon as possible under the conditions that that has all been agreed in National Cabinet?
It's extremely important we reopen in a safe way and in accordance with that plan, Mark, that was agreed at National Cabinet by the Premiers, the Chief Ministers and the Prime Minister. It's based on the best medical advice, Doherty modelling, that says at 70% and 80% vaccination rates, we'll actually see the transmissibility of the virus reduce. We'll actually see the numbers of people who get seriously sick reduce, and we can live safely with COVID. And I think that's a really important point, is that you can't eliminate this virus. No country in the world has done so. Even with the vaccines that we have, you can't eliminate the virus. We have to learn to live with it. And as Australia's been learning to live, for example, with influenza, we have 200,000 cases a year of influenza, 600 tragic deaths as a result, but we don't shut down our economy because of it. And so therefore, for our economy's sake, but also for the well-being of the community, we do need to reopen consistent with that plan.
What I think is, and what I'm getting from this, I've listened to and I've watched a whole lot of stuff you've been putting up lately. It's become an important narrative. I see our New South Wales Premier starting to use the same narrative. It's a very important narrative. You're being very strident about it. What I think is fantastic is the PM. I don't know whether it was negotiated. We don't know. I don't know how this stuff works. I don't know if it was negotiated, but he got him at 70 and 80. He didn't sort of get stuck on 80, which is Doherty's outcome, and it's 70 or 80, and it's over for people over the age of 16. So it's not what Grattan has been indicating. Grattan's been saying, oh, well, yeah, but 70 or 80 is not like 70 or 80% of the total population, which includes young kids, okay? I think, and I don't want to, I think it's been undersold. I think our PM at National Cabinet has done a brilliant job of negotiating some terms for opening as soon as safely possible. That's what I think. And I know we're going to get some, a little bit of pushback on that, and people are going to say, oh, Bouris, what's wrong with you being irresponsible? I don't care. We've got to open, and we've got to find some foundations, like you just said, to open against. And if we don't, what happens? Well, what happens if we don't? I mean, realistically, what happens if we don't, realistically?
Well, what happens when we do is that we will have some people who get sick and we will have some tragic deaths, but we can't live in lockdown forever. We can't live with our borders closed forever. The economy can't afford the level of economic support that's been currently being provided forever. And therefore, we have to adjust. And we're going to adjust based on the best medical advice, and we're going to adjust based on a plan, as you say, that the Prime Minister led National Cabinet to agree to. And for small business, the backbone of the economy, employing around 8 million Australians, 3.5 million small businesses, they need the hope that the plan gives them. They didn't go into small business to get a check every month from the government. They went into small business to build something that's bigger than themselves. And the level of anxiety as well as economic harm that's been caused, obviously, by lockdowns is pretty severe. And so we've got to give them hope, and that's what the plan does.
It's sort of interesting to see the Federal Treasurer acknowledging, and I know you're not a psychiatrist, although I think you might have some psychiatry someone in your family.
Mum's a psychologist.
Exactly. So, but that's interesting because in a sense, that's important for us, small business owners, that you in the government, in your powerful position as Treasurer, alongside the PM, get it. You get finally someone is recognising the anxiety and stress that the small business community across the country is experiencing. And I know there's been a massive public health issue. I get it, and I get the state governments have been confronted with this and they've had to scramble and work out ways around it, blah, blah, blah. I get all that. But what's important is that treasurers, people in power, are now getting up and talking about the anxiety. We can't keep going on these forever. And you're right, business owners don't want handouts. We want to stand on our own 2 feet.
And think about all those kids who have missed a time in the classroom. I know, for example, in Melbourne, my own state, in Victoria, that we've had more than 200 days in lockdown. And I've got a local GP in my electorate who's talked about having to give antidepressants to kids as young as 12. And when, you know how important the year 12, when you do your year 12 is. And for many of those kids last year, they didn't spend much time in the classroom. This year has been equally so. And that is taking a big part of their education away from them. And now, of course, we've got to be driven by the health outcomes. But my point is, avoiding COVID is not the only health outcome that needs to be factored into our decision making. You've also got to be thinking about that mental health burden. And for small businesses, as you know, they care not just about themselves, but they often treat their staff as their family. And so their anxiety is not just for their business, but also for their staff as well.
I saw something you talked about this week, and it was called and it's an extension or it's a loosening, if I could use that word, of the SME, the Small to Medium Enterprise Loan Recovery Scheme. Can you just quickly explain to our consumers and our audience what that means? What are you talking about there?
So since the start of the pandemic, we've put a lot of measures in place to support small business, whether they're regulatory or whether they're a fiscal response. One of them has been that we've offered small and medium-sized enterprises loans of up to $5 million for up to 10 years duration, with up to the first 2 years being repayment-free. The interest capitalises, but there's no repayments due in those first 2 years if that's the arrangement you reach with your bank. Now, up to now, you could only be eligible for that program if you were on JobKeeper in the March quarter. We've now removed that requirement, and that will mean more businesses will get greater access to finance and more businesses will get access to lower cost finance. This program already has supported more than 70,000 loans, Mark, worth more than $6 billion. So it's been a successful program, but COSBOA has warmly received it, ACCI has warmly received it, and they say it will be essential to small businesses in rebuilding and reopening on the other side of COVID.
And for our audience, COSBOA is the Council of Small Business Australia. It's like an organisation who looks after small business. It's an industry body. I just want to quickly talk about something that's very important. It's quite possible, due to the lockdowns, it's quite possible, in fact, maybe probable, that we might have a pretty ordinary GDP number. And of course, the media is going to go nuts about it. They're going to start talking about, is there going to be a recession, 2 negative quarters in a row, etc. I would just make a quick comment, but I like your comment on my comment. This happened this time last year. We had a dip in our growth, the national growth, but the recovery that sort of we experience in January, February, March, April, May, from my point of view, I was saying to people, this was a 1 in 20-year event, the recovery. I've never seen activity as I had seen it at the beginning of this calendar year. And I reckon would have kept going if this Delta variant hadn't hit us up. My gut feeling is, and I think this is hopefully this is what the government's thinking, and I'm saying this all small business, get ready for this. I think if we open up again and we have controls that are in a safe environment, the recovery will be immense because the demand is pent up, ridiculously pent up, irrespective of whether we get 2 more negative months of growth. What's your comment on that as Treasurer?
Well, certainly past experience in Australia during this pandemic has been that the economy bounces back strongly. I mean, in the back half of last year, Mark, we saw the strongest growth in over 50 years. We've seen the unemployment rate fall to 4.6%, which is a 12-year low. And even after the end of JobKeeper, you saw more and more people get into work. Interestingly, Australia, ahead of any other advanced economy, saw its economy become bigger now than it was going into the pandemic. We saw more people in work now than going into the pandemic. The United States, in comparison, have employment levels that are still 4% below what they were going into the pandemic. So our performance in the labour market in terms of economic growth has been very strong. Now, you're right that the September quarter will be challenging. Treasury tell me the expectation is that will see a contraction of at least 2% in the September quarter. As for the December quarter, it's certainly too early to say. But if we open up in accordance with the 70 and 80% targets, I'm confident the economy will bounce back strongly. Why is that? Firstly, as you say, household consumption drives demand and drives more economic activity. And we know that there's some $290 billion that's been accumulated on household and business balance sheets today that was not there this time last year. When restrictions get eased, the savings ratio comes down and people spend, and that drives economic activity. We also know that business investment, and we saw some numbers just yesterday come out, is very strong off the back of our immediate expensing initiative. So in the June quarter, we saw a 4.4% increase in machinery and equipment expenditure, but in non-mining business investment, we saw a 6% increase and a 15% increase through the year, which is the best result in over 13 years. Home builder has supported the construction sector and it's got a strong pipeline of activity. There's still heavy demand for our exports, and we had the largest trade surplus on record in June. So I'm confident, Mark, that the fundamentals of the economy are strong, and consumer confidence today is still higher than it was at the height of the pandemic last year. And as you know, monetary policy with a cash rate of 10 basis points is highly accommodative. So that combination of our fiscal support, that combination of monetary policy being accommodative, I think augurs well for the bounce back once restrictions ease.
So I just want to, I might just, with the greatest respect, put that back in a bit more plain English, Josh, because you're talking as a treasurer. But I think what the treasurer is talking about here is the fundamentals of Australia still remain. And it's one of the reasons why we've outperformed most economies in the world for the last 30 years. We have an extraordinarily strong balance sheet, relatively speaking, to everyone in the world. Yeah, that's the country, national balance sheet and state balance sheet in New South Wales at least. I know that for sure. Still AAA rated, and the agencies aren't really indicating anything else at this stage. That's the first thing. Second thing is we have a government who has a preparedness to put their shoulder behind the wheel with fiscal policy. In other words, tax reductions that are all we're working towards. We've already had tax reductions, but we've got lots more business tax reductions coming. You've talked about the $150,000 incentive, which was very strong in the June quarter, whereby you get a tax write-off for spending money up to $150,000 on your business. You're talking about low interest rate environment. We still have a low interest rate, and our Reserve Bank is being extraordinary. I mean, our Reserve Bank governor and everyone in the Reserve Bank have been extraordinary managing our position, relatively speaking, and have actually told us that we still can look forward to have really cheap interest rates for the next 4 years, the next 3.5 years at least. That's enough time to recover. So Australia is well positioned. And one thing is, when you say our balance sheets have improved, what the Treasurer is saying is during these periods that we're just experiencing now, we tend to save our money because for a whole lot of reasons. We just don't spend as much. We're not going out as much. We're not going on holidays. There's a whole series of reasons. I'm sure someone can do the analytics on it. But the point is, we still have demand for haircuts, beauticians, holidays, gifts, travel, blah, blah, blah. And
that's just you, Mark. And that's just you.
Well, mate, I'm doing my best to keep the economy going. Don't worry, I haven't stopped. But we have the fundamentals existing here in this country, and unemployment is still low, relatively speaking, to the rest of the world. And it's actually low relative to our own numbers.
Yeah, it's better than our forecasts. And Australians are inherently optimistic, and our economy, I think, has performed very well through the most challenging times. And, people have to put what we've gone through with COVID into perspective, Mark. I mean, this has been the biggest economic shock since the Great Depression.
Yeah.
You've seen not just impacts on the demand side where, people obviously can't go out and spend, but also on the supply side, everything's been closed. And so it's been quite a remarkable period. And I'm really proud of the way Australians have responded. These economic numbers don't belong to the government. They belong to the Australian people. And everyone has contributed to that bounce back. And we will get through these current lockdowns in New South Wales and Victoria. We will reopen. We will stick to the plan. And I'm looking to Australia's economy for a pretty bright future ahead.
Well, I'm going to say, I can easily get criticised. I'm going to say it straight up anyway. I'm a Josh Frydenberg fan, so I'll make it straight out there, okay? I think he's doing not because of any particular reason, he's just doing a bloody good job, and in a very difficult environment, all new, all novel, untested, and sure, people make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, and I'm sure the PM and the Treasurer would say, yeah, we could have done that better or done this better, but let's look forward. So looking forward, we've got to look forward. We've got to work on the assumption that things will be okay. If we work on the assumption that things are going to be dreadful, there's just no point doing anything. You've got to work on the assumption that we can get it right. And we've got to be optimistic, as you say. But what is killing me is that some other people in authority in various states are sort of playing a bit of politics, And you've been pretty forthright about this. And tell me, what's the deal? Like, I don't understand. I just don't understand why we're all Australians. We might have separate states. We're all Australians. We're all trying to get one outcome. Why is that happening? Why do you think it is happening?
Well, the first thing is our Constitution gives the states the authority over those public health orders. But obviously, as a federal government, we're picking up the bill for a lot of these decisions, whether it was JobKeeper or the cash flow boost or the $750 payments to pensioners, carers, veterans. We've been picking up that bill just as we are right now. I mean, we've got a COVID disaster payment, Mark, that's going out to people who've lost hours of work, $750 a week. We've put more than $4 billion out since July for just that program. So we'll continue to meet the economic support payments that we've outlined. But right now, the best thing that could happen for the country is that the states and the territories, together with the federal government, agree to stick to the plan. And that is really, really important because your listeners, viewers today, they need hope. They need hope, which you get from knowing that your economy will open up. And we've been there to support them and we'll continue to provide support in many different ways. But they need hope, and that's what the plan gives them.
They need hope, and with hope we can have some certainty, and with certainty we can start to invest, and we'll go out and we'll spend.
Because if it's not 70 and 80%, Mark, well, what number is it? If it's not 70 and 80%, when do the schools reopen? When do the businesses reopen? When do you go to the funerals and the weddings of loved ones? When do you travel more freely in your own country? You see, people are turning on the TV and they look at Wembley or they look at Dodger Stadium and it's full of people. And they know in Europe, people are going about their normal lives. In Australia, that's coming our way. But we just need to hit to these 70 and 80% targets. And the great news is Australians are rolling up their sleeves and getting the jab in record numbers. So people are absolutely focused on getting vaccinated as their way out of this crisis.
Well, I hope that I can have a beer with you in December or sometime down in Canberra or down in Melbourne.
Sounds good.
And as a result of the world, Australia opening up, and hopefully you and I and or the PM for his Cronulla Sharks can go and watch your team, Melbourne Storm, his team, the Sharks, my team, the Roosters. We're all sort of around about there. I mean, if anything's going to happen, Melbourne Storm is probably a odds-on favourite to get into the grand final, and no doubt you won't be able to go and see it because it's going to be up in Queensland. But maybe next year. All the best, Treasurer. I really appreciate. I know you're on a time limit here. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for your really positive and constructive view on things. And by the way, thanks for your forthrightness.
Well, thanks, Mark. And can I just say thanks to all your followers on the call today. As small business people, they're the backbone of the economy, and we deeply appreciate what they do, not just for the economy, but for their local communities. We've been there to support them. We'll continue to be there to support them. And when we open up in a safe way, they will grow and they'll be stronger on the other side. There is light at the end of the tunnel. So very, very big thank you to all those small business owners and staff who are on the call today.
Josh Frydenberg, thanks very much. See you soon, mate.